Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have with me Abhijit Iyer Mitra, and we take a look at the evolving politics in the Middle East region, the Israel UAE Accord, and a few other things. Welcome to PGurus channel, Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Joy Ma Durga, thank you for having me on.
Invoking goddess Durga brings to me a song, Durge Durge Durgati Nashani, Mahishashara Mordani, Jai Ma Durge. Prayer to Durga
I
back
don't
to
know
you.
that one. I don't know that one. I only know Aigiri Nandini.
Yes. So, Shakti is in many manifestations, and Durga is one of them. And we are not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about what is going on in the Middle East region. For example, we'll start first with Pakistan borrowing from Paul to pay Peter, which is that they took 1 billion from China and gave it to Saudi Arabia. So, but Saudi Arabia still hasn't opened the oil spigot, has it?
No. So, see, here's the thing. The reason I said Joy Ma Durga is because, this is all about power and power politics. And what you're seeing with Saudi Arabia now is that Mohammed bin Salman, we'll call him Mohammed bin Sultan because, the Saudis hate the word Sultan. But effectively, what has happened is they have become a sultanate. They have moved away from the consensual Saud family decision making to a monarchical unilateral decision making. So he should be called Mohammed bin Sultan because he's not yet the Sultan, but he's going to become the Sultan. He's got a very finely tuned, and there's no polite way of putting this, but he's got a very finely tuned bullshit meter, it turns out. If you look at the people he went after, Walid bin Talal, Jamal Khashoggi for that matter,
Right.
were people of the so-called old consensus who were going on peddling the same drivel that had gotten Saudi Arabia nowhere, and he broke that. Now, what happens here is that with Pakistan, he was willing to give them some leeway up to a point, and this is where you have to admire Mohammed bin Sultan. We'll call him MBS because people don't agree with Sultan, so MBS. He's done what no American administration could, and possibly no Chinese administration will, which is he's realized that Pakistan has been a professional peddler of crap for the last 70 years. Pakistan, curiously, has been just as non-aligned as we have. No more, no less. Not on paper, but in principle. They've used the Saudis against us. They've used the Americans against us. They've played off everyone against each other. Mostly succeeded. And never stuck their necks out for anybody else. The only time they claim they stuck their neck out, which was in Afghanistan, was for their own interests. They created their own little strategic depth, as it was called. And it definitely wasn't in America. It was a slight alignment of interests, and that was it. Now, what has happened is MBS isn't willing to take this kind of crap anymore. And, he was probably willing to let it pass till Qureshi, the foreign minister, went all berserk on the Saudis and the Emiratis. They never gauged the change in mood that MBS had brought about. And remember, MBS has been mentored by MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed, who's the crown prince of Abu Dhabi, and who's always been very well disposed towards India, but he couldn't change his policy because Saudi Arabia was the dominant power, and they always coordinated their policies. Now, with MBS, MBZ has been able to do it, and it has been a cooperative effort between the two of them. And there were a lot of things that went into this decision. One is, I think they decided very early on that Pakistan was a basket case. If you remember, the Emiratis, they had kicked out all the Pakistani doctors a while back. Do you remember? Because
Yes,
they
yes, yes, yes.
even at that point of time, Pakistan should have read the writing on the wall. They did not. Before that, the Saudis had sent back all the Pakistani guards because the Pakistani army, unlike, because King Faisal was killed by his own nephew,
Right.
because Islam was deemed more important than family. So they had brought in these Pakistani guards because the Pakistanis were deemed to be reliable. And the moment they saw the Pakistanis the army becoming radicalized at the middle level, the upper section, you don't get promotion to the upper section if you're a radical, because that's all about dhanda, it's all about money making, the Fauji Foundation and all of that. So what has happened is that they were anyway on thin ice, and now, in addition to Qureshi's insults, all the eggs have come home to roost, which is that Pakistan is a bad investment. They're never going to be able to pay back anything. It's basically, like you said, taking from Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. I don't like Yanis Varoufakis, but he had this very interesting example on banking. It's how you've only got $2 between you and a barrel of wine, and you buy the barrel of wine for whatever, and you're taking it back to the village to sell at a profit, and you keep paying each other 1 rupee. I'm paying you 1 rupee for one cup, and by the time they reach the village, within that 2 rupees, they have finished off the entire barrel of wine, nothing to sell, and they wasted all the money. So that is kind of how this thing works. In Pakistan's case, it's deadbeat. I think what was more important was this is actually a much more searing indictment of China and CPEC than it is of Pakistan. Because MBS and MBZ, what they've effectively done is that they've said that CPEC isn't going to take Pakistan anywhere. Pakistan isn't going to benefit from it. It's going to be a stillborn investment. And they've cut Pakistan loose. It's still not a full cutting loose. It's a warning sign कि behave yourself. If you अगर अपनी औकात से थोड़ा ज़्यादा जाओगे, we can do a lot worse to you. I think that's important because the signal is to the Pakistan army as well. Because we all know from it shows as well, but Rahim Khan has written about it quite extensively about her cocaine-addled husband. The cocaine effects are beginning to show. They've been showing for quite some time. The issue is it's also filtering down to the rest of government. The rest of government is in panic, and there are signs that the army is losing patience with the man. So we now have a situation where Pakistan has lost one of the important funders. It had to do this, money circulation racket, like Yanis Varoufakis. God, that's such a tongue twister of a name. Like Yanis's wine joke. They were doing this. They were playing off America against the Arabs, not against the Arabs, but they were kind of, Islam for this, against Russia and Taliban from the Americans, and playing China off, saying America. China is now the only card they have left to play because America isn't giving them money. Saudi Arabia isn't going to give them soft loans anymore. They've basically pushed Pakistan into China's fold. And the brilliant thing about it is America doesn't give a damn. They weren't willing to cut the umbilical, but they've allowed MBS to do it.
Now, let me ask you a question. Now that America is beginning to leave Afghanistan, they may still have a token force there. Does it also mean that China will sort of inherit Afghanistan's problems too?
I'm hoping they do. There's nothing better that I can see than China going into Afghanistan and wasting $1 more trillion in trying to bring whatever. They're not going to bring freedom and democracy. They're going to bring what? Yeah, democracy with Chinese characteristics into with Confucian characteristics, into Afghanistan. The thing is, the Chinese still are, I think they're fairly smart to get into the regime change business or the nation building business. But I've said this for a very long time, Shri. I think in the 2-3 years that I've appeared on your YouTube channel, I have stated this a few times. India's good fortune is not that we have Modi as the PM. It's that we have Xi Jinping, who's a blithering idiot, as the head of China. That is our saving grace at the moment. That is what keeps us safe. So I'm kind of hoping Xi Jinping is enough of a blithering idiot to walk into this whole thing. I'm not going to name him, but a particularly noted strategic expert once said, Pakistan and China deserve each other. And, you throw Afghanistan into the mix, it's good.
So for our viewers' benefit, could you please tell us the two people that you were trying to imitate just now?
Nobody.
No, there was a trace of democracy that was, I thought, it was
that was just stereotyping Americans and Chinese. That was it. No people.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Generic imitation.
Fair enough. We were just trying to have what I call as a bit of a banter in the middle of a serious conversation. Now let's take a look at China. See, we know that these guys are not going to go away so easily. They have to be kicked out. Do you think India is making long-term preparations along the line of actual control? Do they have a plan to squeeze off the supply line someplace to make them kind of sweat a little bit or something like that? What do you think India might be thinking now?
I don't know. I think right now we're just focusing on building infrastructure and seeing disengagement comes through. They are not occupying any part of Indian territory, but they need to move back from an eyeball to eyeball confrontation. So I think we will focus on that and we will focus on infrastructure. But the important thing to remember is the positive that has come out of the situation in Galwan, the situation in Ladakh, is that we have established India's unfettered right to build infrastructure on our side of the LAC. China can't use it as a bargaining tool anymore. That is not up for negotiation, and that is a very, very important point that we need to remember. What are the plans for the future? I don't know, but let us be clear about this. The only viable long-term military plan you have to protect your border is to move away from land-centric warfare to air-centric warfare, reduce your number of ground troops, focus more on technology and lethality rather than on cannon fodder, which is what you do at the moment.
Good point there. And of course, altitude plays a part in dealing with China along the LAC, but I think it's not that bad that it has to be rethought 3 or 4 times. Now let's take a look at the other thing that happened, that is Israel and United Arab Emirates deciding to open full diplomatic channels. Now this one is a very significant development because UAE, and you just alluded to that about MBZ. I'm wondering if there is a concerted plan here going on. Perhaps you can share your thoughts on this.
It's actually been on the books for a long time. There was a lot of talk about this starting almost about 2-3 years back in Israel. Because what had happened was we took one of the first flights that was allowed to go over Saudi territory as well. Direct, because all Arab countries ban flights to Israel, to or from Israel. Doesn't matter what the airline is, flying over their territory. And, we took one of those first flights, which was the Air India flight from Delhi to Tel Aviv. Even then, we knew that something was changing. We had known for a long time, at least those of us who visit Israel regularly, and the Israelis were briefing us on it, that they were having, not detailed briefings, but casual briefings, they tell us, that we're fairly thick with the Saudis. We're making up on a lot of things. In this case, I think UAE had set the path a long time before the Saudis followed suit. In fact, they had set this whole plan in motion even before King Salman took over. Because if you remember, there was that famous assassination of some Palestinian representative. I don't. This must have been about 5-6 years back, of a Palestinian representative at a hotel in Dubai. And these were Israeli agents who were, they were traveling on different passports, but they'd come to Dubai, carried out a whole operation. In spite of that, the UAE normalized trade ties. And, there was an Israeli minister, I think the sports minister had visited, because an Israeli athlete won the gold medal at some, I think it was a judo or something contest in the UAE some 2-3 years back. The Israeli sports minister, I think, was there. The Israeli national anthem was played and the Israeli flag was flown. For the first time, I think, in a peninsular Arab country, other than Oman. Oman, has had relations with Israel for quite some time. Netanyahu has actually visited Oman as well. Again, this was part of it. I think Oman, Sultan Qaboos, the late Sultan Qaboos, he started this thing. But Qaboos always did things, he was very avuncular in that sense. He always did things under the radar. And they had ties with the Israelis for a while. Then the UAE. I think MBS is now at an inflection point. He knows that Saudi society is very conservative, and recognizing Israel might be going too far too soon. So he's not going to make the same mistake that the Shah of Iran did. I'm hoping he does not make the same mistake that the Shah of Iran did. But let us be clear about this. There is a de facto alliance, not just diplomatic recognition, a de facto alliance between the Saudis, the Emiratis, and Israel. And, we shouldn't be surprised about this because, when Syria using proxies was invading Jordan, the Israelis were willing to, even though technically they were at war with Jordan, the Israelis, this was in the 70s, the Israelis were willing to go into Jordan to bomb the Syrian invasion force to help the Jordanians. Similarly, when Jordan entered one of these wars, I forget if it was the 67 war or the 73 war, I think it was 67. No, 73, I think. The Jordanian king sent a message to the prime. Yeah, it was the 73 war. He sent a message to Golda Meir saying, would you mind if I join the war? These two guys are pressurizing me, Nasser and I forget who the Syrian president was. So I really need to put up some kind of a show. So, I'll just send 50 tanks to do some action. Would you really mind that much? And of course, Golda Meir was having a terrible time because the Egyptians were doing pretty damn well at that point of time. The Syrian front didn't go that well for the Syrians, but the Egyptian army made some fantastic successes. They crossed the Suez and everything. So she's like, no, you can't. And then it was like, look, I've got to. So, with the benefit of hindsight, Golda Meir made a mistake. She should have just allowed those 50 tanks, whatever. Had she negotiated it properly, they would have, taken the tanks about 20 kilometers inside Israel. The crews would have abandoned it and gone back. And then without anybody dying, the Israelis would have planted dynamite inside it and blown it up or something like that and pretended it was a battle. They didn't. But see, the Israelis have learned. So nothing is ever what it seems in the Middle East. You can fairly gauge things, but it's... and this is why I love Middle Eastern politics, because it's just so much fun.
Now, a quick question for you, a slightly different topic from what you and I are used to talking about. Why did the Board of Cricket Control for India decide to have IPL in UAE?
Not the faintest idea. I guess it has to do with the money laundering and funding rackets.
Well, see,
Look, you're asking the wrong person to do with cricket or with movies. I didn't even know there was a person called Sushant Singh Rajput till this whole thing blew up a few weeks back. Um, I mean, with cricket, I don't even know who these people are. Like, I forget their names. The only reason I know there's somebody called MS Dhoni is because apparently there was a movie and there were some posters about it. Before that, I didn't even know who he was. So you're asking the wrong person. Sports and uh, uh, what's the other thing? Sports and movies. Bollywood. Don't ask me about.
Well, you inadvertently mentioned two names that are connected. Sushant Singh Rajput played Dhoni in Dhoni the movie. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So, any rate, because he has announced his retirement today, whatever. So, but
Okay.
Thank you very much, Abhijit. Get well. I know you've been going through a bout of not so wellness. You're always ready for to offer us what your thoughts are on the world. But take care.
Before we go, I just want to share an inspirational story with you.
Yes.
I have been tested and found having COVID antibodies, which means apparently I contracted COVID. I didn't know about it, and now I am COVID proof. So it's amazing, isn't it? Like contracting a disease, being totally asymptomatic and not knowing anything about it. So great. Thank you.
That's good. And in fact, you might be asked to donate plasma, and that's always a good thing. So
yes.
Thank you very much and namaskar.
Jai Ma Durga.